will be able to go to the hospitals to take part in this experience, but it is up to you. It is not required of you to go to the clinics and hospitals in this process, but you are missing out on an extremely valuable experience if you choose not to participate. It's a huge component of selecting a good project and having a valuable experience as an engineer working to solve a real problem. The observation stage is when you will have a chance to see behind the scenes of healthcare. These are just some of the general guidelines about how to behave in a hospital. You might be assigned a surgeon to work with in the next year, and their schedules are unbelievably busy. If you are taking 18 credits now, you might think your schedule's rough, but wait until you deal with your mentor's schedules. It's going to be difficult, sometimes impossible, just to get FaceTime with your clinical mentor. Sometimes it may take 5 emails over a month to get a single response. You will have to send occasional reminders and be patient. Sometimes you will have to give up and move on to another potential contact. Definitely be punctual for all meetings and observations. I guarantee you your surgeon's going to be late for a lot of your meetings. You'll have to be there on time no matter what, because if you are late, you are losing invaluable time to get information you won't get anywhere else. The information you get out of a single interview can save you weeks of research that doesn't get you anywhere because the information is simply not public. In senior design, I recommend you select one team member to be the designated communicator for the team. This person will schedule all the meetings, observations, and interviews. When you go into the interview, you are just going to have one person on the team conduct the interview. You should script out the interview questions as a team beforehand, but a single person should be the one conducting the interview. The other team members should be recording the interview and recording visual observations of the person being interviewed. This will help the interview proceed as smoothly as possible. I recommend that you wear business casual clothes to the hospital. Guys should wear a tie and business slacks, although a tie is not always necessary. No need for a sport coat in most cases. Girls should also be mindful of dressing professionally. It is always better to be safe than sorry with your attire. Don't show up to the hospital with flip-flops and a Hawaiian t-shirt expecting to get into the operating room. They won't take you seriously, and you won't leave a favorable impression on the people you are trying to observe. In general, be respectful of all patients and caretakers. The care providers are being generous, giving you the opportunity to go to the hospital, so you should show your appreciation by acting professionally at all times. In addition, you need to be respectful of the patients that they are serving. The surgeries usually start at around 7 a.m. Arrive early and leave valuables in the car. Just bring your hospital ID badge, driver's license, and your cell phone with you. Never take pictures with the phone, however. Wear a short-sleeved shirt to the hospital if you're going to a surgery observation, because the scrubs you will wear could have short sleeves and you don't want to have your clothing showing from underneath. Before you get to the hospital, it is a good idea to ask your host through email or in an interview if it is alright if you bring a notebook with you into the hospital. Bring your own lock for the locker room if you want. For surgery observation, the hospital will give you a hat, face mask, eye shield, shirt, pants, and shoe covers. When you are done with them at the end of the day, there is usually a basket to put the pants and shirt into. The rest of the outfit can be discarded into the trash. It's easy to get lost. Some hospitals are like giant mazes. The doors just have numbers on them, and you can waste time walking in circles. Pick up a map at the front of the desk of the hospital, and ask for directions when you get there. There will be times when you get completely lost, and people will be too busy to ask for directions. If this happens, act like you know where you're going until you can find someone that can help you. You don't want to look like you don't know where you're going, because you might have to stop and spend some time explaining the whole reason why you were there. Act confident and ask for help when appropriate. In the operating room area, you will see a big board or a screen with the day's operation schedule. This schedule is subject to change, so don't be surprised when the surgery you wanted to see gets canceled or postponed. Sometimes a patient's condition improves unexpectedly, and the surgeon decides that the surgery is no longer needed. You might sit in an operating room while it is being prepped for an hour, and then hear that it was canceled at the last minute. You need to set aside several hours of a day to get a meaningful experience. You can't just go there and leave after 30 minutes. You will definitely miss something in the process that might have been interesting. Give yourself at least 4 to 6 hours of time for a shadowing experience. That means you should try, if possible, to schedule your classes so that you have a free afternoon or morning just for observations. It would be great if you could have a full day to go work in the field. If something ever goes wrong during a shadowing experience, you should leave the room immediately. Even if you have never seen the surgery before, you will know when something has gone wrong. Get out of the area so that you don't have to get in the way during a critical time. If something causes you to react and makes you feel uncomfortable, you should also step out of the room for this reason and maybe go to the lobby and take a break. Don't feel pressure in any way to have to watch something that makes you feel uncomfortable. So when you're out in the field, you're going to be around situations where people don't want you to document with their names attached. You will be exposed in the hallways to hearing conversations or seeing patient medical records, and you want to be careful to not document things that are sensitive. Don't record patient names at any time. You can record patient ages and the conditions they have, but never their names. There is a small chance that you may encounter someone you know who is receiving treatment. If this happens, you should excuse yourself from that shadowing experience and try to find another one while you are there. Remember, shadowing is a confidential experience, and anything that you see and hear inside the hospital should not be shared publicly. Your notes are only to be used for your team's project. Here is a picture of the different people in a typical operating room. If you are in a teaching hospital, there can sometimes be 12 people working in the room. Medical students will often watch procedures from the sides of the room with you. The anesthesiologist monitors the vital signs of the patient. They are always sitting at the head of the patients. The chief surgeon does the main work on the patient. The physician's assistant will do some of the surgical work and assist the chief surgeon with patient prep and closure. The circulating nurse documents all of the supplies being used during the procedure. You will see them working on a computer station in a corner of the room. The scrub nurse will prep all the tools to make sure the surgeon has everything needed for the procedure. During the procedure, the scrub nurse hands over and takes tools away from the surgeon as needed. For example, a scrub nurse will unpack a biological heart valve for a valve replacement and get it to the correct temperature before the surgeon puts it in the patient. In other words, the scrub nurse makes the procedure flow smoothly. These are all people that you will hopefully have a chance to talk to. Don't just focus on your one mentor. If possible, you should try to interact with all these other people and set up additional shadowing opportunities. Here's a picture of a modern-day operating room. There is a lot going on here, but what do you see in the back corner of the room? You will be surprised when you see medical students texting during the procedures. I have seen it a lot. It is important that you don't text in the hospital. It might make it more difficult to have good conversations with the professionals in the room if they see you occasionally texting while they work. You need to show respect to the situation, and you probably won't have service in the hospital anyway. Be alert inside the operating room. If you pulled an all-nighter before the scheduled shadowing experience, you should probably reschedule it. You don't want to make a mistake because of a lack of focus or being tired. You could accidentally bump into the wrong thing or trip on the cords. Listen to directions from the staff and the surgeons. They'll tell you where to stand. And again, don't text so that you can stay engaged during the entire experience. Don't touch anything on the blue-covered tables. The instruments on these tables have all been sterilized by autoclave or ethylene oxide gas. Don't touch these tables because you all have bacteria all over you, and you could cause serious problems by contaminating the surgical supplies, so always steer clear of these blue-covered tables. The scrub nurse will likely tell you where to stand in the operating room. Keep your hands in front of you at all times. Don't lean on equipment to take notes. Surgeries can take up to 6 hours and longer. You will be lucky if there's a stool for you to sit on in the room. If there isn't, you should step out of the room to take occasional breaks. The surgeon will be there most of the time, but remember, you can always take a coffee break. Otherwise, you might be standing for most of the day. And you want to have your ID badge visible at all times. When you are taking notes, these are some of the things that you should be on the lookout for. Look for times when the patients or the providers experience pain or discomfort. There may be a procedure technique that is uncomfortable for the surgeons or the nurse. Look for times when the patient is uncomfortable before and after the procedure. Was there a tense moment in the course of the care? Try to find out what made that moment more tense. Was there wasted time during the procedure that could have been used more productively? You're going to be watching the same procedures performed by different surgeons at different institutions. Are there any differences in the procedures that have an effect on the outcome? If a surgery is having a poor outcome in a single case or repeatedly, what do you think is causing it? You're going to have a lot of new questions. Write them down and ask them at a more opportune time later. When you are taking notes, write down direct quotes and facial expressions like a journalist. You want to create objective notes. That means don't take notes that involve your interpretation or opinion. For example, write something like, "The surgeon picked up the scalpel 30 minutes into the procedure." You don't want to write stuff such as, "The surgeon must have been tired because she dropped a suture on the floor." Only write down factual stuff that you directly observe, and there's no question about whether or not it happened. This is not a time for your opinion or solution ideas. Pause this video and take the time to read this slide carefully. It is an example of a person creating a narrative with the objective note-taking approach that I just mentioned. It documents a person's situation where a line in a perfusion system got blocked unexpectedly and the surgeon had to find a quick solution. In an ideal world, your notes would be as good as this. Note the level of detail that this person documented. You want a good mix of quotes and observations, so try your best to record as much as possible. A medical condition is the only truth. What that means is that a condition is a fact. A person has high blood pressure or broken bones. That's the truth. But the way that they are being treated is not an everlasting truth. It is something that evolves over time. The way that you see these conditions being treated today is just something that happens to be the best method now. 10 years from now, it is going to be treated differently. The condition is fixed and therefore the truth. When you go out into the operating room and see all this complex equipment or you're looking for problems, the only thing that matters at its fundamental level is the condition that is being treated. You are trying to affect truth by becoming a part of its evolving management. You will hear communication between doctors and nurses. Listen for that. See how they prepare patients and equipment. Look for redundancies. How is stuff organized and transported? These are little things, but they might be having a consequence on the treatment outcomes. After you perform an observation or conduct an interview, you should debrief with your team immediately afterwards if possible. Go find a coffee shop or a quiet place in the lobby to discuss the key findings of the day. Take the time to explain your observations to the rest of the group and ask your team members for clarification on things that confuse you. This is a good way to capture the important points and share knowledge amongst the team. Even if all team members were observing the same scenes together, you are all not going to pick up on the same things. When the observation is over, there are likely some key questions that you should be able to answer now. As an observer, you are trying to learn about the different perspectives of all of the involved stakeholders. These are some of the questions presented in the Stanford Biodesign textbook that you should try to answer regarding the patient's experience. If you watch closely, you can get answers to these questions after a few observation sessions. If you don't get the answers on your own, you should be able to do some additional background research online. While you don't want to directly engage the patients in conversation unless you have permission, the nurses can be helpful in explaining the recovery process for patients after their treatment. Another perspective is the provider's perspective. You may be assigned or choose to work under the mentorship of a single physician or nurse. You should keep in mind that you are not bound to work permanently under that initial mentor for the entire duration of the project. Your team should make the decision about what type of mentorship you are looking for. It shouldn't be a problem for a team to switch mentors after a few weeks. A team may find another interest, or the first mentor could be too busy to arrange meetings with. Additionally, a mentor is going to tell you what parts of the job they dislike and what equipment causes problems. As observers, you should take notes of these statements. But remember, they are just comments coming from an individual regarding the field which you are investigating. You can't let their complaints and their suggested solutions to their own problems guide you in a particular direction. The project is for your team to discover, and you shouldn't let a stakeholder try to hand off a project to your group just because it is relevant to that individual stakeholder. As observers, you are just taking in the collection of all inputs. Later on, during problem identification, you will have to verify which inputs are related to real problems that are worth addressing. The people directly providing care to patients are often not able to give you information about procedure costs. You will likely have to set up meetings with administration in the hospital responsible for managing the finances of the hospital to answer some of these questions. Reach out to health insurance companies as well, and be sure to emphasize that you are students working on a project. If you are unable to go to hospitals or you are preparing for your first observations on site, my favorite resource for vicarious surgical observations is orlive.com. ORLive is the YouTube of educational videos that depict entire surgeries. It is a great way to learn the basic steps of a procedure and to see what types of tools are used to perform it. Sometimes the surgeon will narrate the steps of the procedure similar to the way a sports announcer will call a football game. You can pause the videos when you hear unfamiliar terminology so that you can stay engaged and informed of what's going on. If you have a weak stomach and you want to prepare yourself for watching surgeries, ORLive is a good place to go. A lot of the videos are of heart operations, but they also have a ton of other videos on other types of surgeries as well. YouTube can also be a good place to watch procedures. New devices are often shown in promotional videos. If you want to know how a new device is used in the hands of a surgeon, YouTube is a place to look. Sometimes people have a weak stomach. All the nurses and doctors I have talked to tell students to eat well before watching a surgery. Although this may counter what you want to do, eating before watching a surgery helps prevent you from fainting. You also want to eat something before heading to the hospital because the surgeries can last many hours at a time. The surgery will not stop for several hours, and you may not get a lunch break. Once you go past the doors into the clinic from the waiting room area, you aren't going to be able to come and go for food so easily, so be sure to eat well before you go to the hospital.